Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is probably the rarest Mopar you're ever gonna see on this channel. This is a 1970 Plymouth Sport Fury GT V-Code 446 barrel car, and it happens to be mostly original and numbers matching. 1970 Sport Fury GTs in general are quite rare. Tom Hergert with Rocket Restorations happens to own this one, but this one's just a regular 440 cruising model. This is no V-Code 6-barrel car. Tom was trusted with the care and restoration of this car, and he's done several great videos on it over on his channel already. So if you want to get the full story and more background on this thing, I suggest you go over there. I've never been one of those option code, fender tag, decoding guys, but I will show you the tag for this car. I don't know, if that's your thing, there you go. This is the part that really matters, the part I'm most interested in. This is the 1970 440 6-barrel engine. It's called a 6-barrel because this is a Plymouth. If it was a Dodge, it would be a 6-pack. I've already done a video on the subject of the 6-pack or 6-barrel engine. I rebuilt this one last year for a 1970 Challenger that we're restoring here at Rocket. Hopefully we get to see this thing in that car at some point in the near future. We did hear it run on a stand with a 4-barrel, and it went really well. If you're curious about what does and does not constitute a 446 barrel engine, I suggest you go watch that video because I'm not going to rehash all of that here. Suffice to say, this is pretty much the pinnacle of Chrysler's muscle engines, right alongside the 426 Hemi. Apparently, there were approximately 66 6-barrel 70 Sport Fury GTs built. There are not very many known to survive today. It's less than 15, and less than 5 of those, as I understand, have their original numbers matching engine. This car's been owned by the same family since the mid-1970s, and it was parked, I believe, around 1981. It was wrecked twice in a ditch, allegedly, but it's in remarkably good shape given all of that. Yeah, it's seen some stuff. Still though, very cool. I'll be the first to tell you I'm not really a C-body guy. I'm not the most knowledgeable person on these things, but I am getting a bit of a crash course in them since this thing has shown up. This was Plymouth's full-size muscle car for 1970, the greatest of the great. This one in particular was really awesome. It was red with original black bucket seat interior and a center console and all kinds of other neat features. The hideaway headlights, like a Charger, are certainly one of the coolest parts. Now, as you can probably tell, this car is already on its way to being disassembled. We've got a deadline on this, which is the McCacken show in, well, I don't remember when that is, October or something. Anyway, this engine needs to come out and get rebuilt. All of the poop and muck needs to be scraped off of it. The mouse pee needs to be cleaned out of the interior, and in general, we've got to get this thing back in usable shape. It is not getting fully restored. It's going to be improved as much as it can, but all of this is going to be saved, if at all possible. This is not original paint on the entire car. Some of it is, as I understand, but it's been on there for long enough that it's earned the right to stay. I posted about this car on my Instagram, which is incidentally called Dead Dodge Garage, and it garnered a lot of attention there. The comment I heard again and again was that the horrible Ford hood scoop needed to be removed, and we've since done that. Unfortunately, there are a bunch of holes where it was, so that's not great. It turns out that this scoop was actually installed by the original selling dealer, and it's been on there for the car's entire life, so we might have to put it back on. We're gonna see if we can have the bumper mounting straightened out, and we will be replacing this fiberglass fender extension, which is very broken. With any luck, we'll find an original red one. Anyway, the big job today is removing the drivetrain. This engine is seized solid. And not only that, but all of the carburetors are seized solid too. These are 3 Holley 2-barrels sitting on top of the iron intake, which was factory for 1970. Now, if you're a hardcore Mopar purist, you will notice various things on this car that are wrong currently. I believe either the heads have been off or the entire engine's been out at some point in the past. Obviously, that was many decades ago. The hardware holding the carbs down to the manifold is incorrect, and there are lots of other little things. Regardless, we've taken many, many reference pictures of this, and we'll be comparing between those and pictures of other period cars to make sure we get things as right as we can. Trev here at Rocket is like the Sport Fury GT guy. He actually owns one of these V-Code cars himself. His is black. It's also very rusty and in pieces. He has put in a whole lot of time getting this car taken apart carefully and preserving things. According to this list, all we need to do now is remove the cross-member mount, the engine mount bolts, and the transmission linkage. We're rejoining the action hours later. Trev has done all of those things I said needed to happen, and now we're gonna yard this thing out. For some reason, I'm always this guy. So now we're under here. We're gonna pop out these last 2 cross-member bolts. But first, we needed floor jack. It's the worst sound I've ever heard in my life.
I've heard an RX-7, they're worse.
Why are we throwing shade at rotary, guys? Literally one forever later.
this is gross.
It might have been off-roaded a couple times in its day. You don't get this kind of perspective just anywhere. Obviously, we have it up on the lift to take all this stuff apart, but to get the engine out with the picker, you kind of need it on the ground. So anyway, now I'm this guy running the jack and just kind of hanging out. It's the next day, and we're just about ready to go on a 446 barrel archaeological dig. This stuff is going to get a workout today. We need to get the transmission off the back. The torque converter is going to stay attached to the crank when we do that, so watch your toes and steer clear of the lake. Basically just had to wiggle the transmission off of the back of this thing, which was harder than I thought it would be. At the same time, it was lifting the back of the engine, and we kind of covered the floor in coolant. Removing a torque converter is always obnoxious, but it's more obnoxious when your crankshaft doesn't turn. I've almost got this now. I'm having to carefully back this bolt out because it's running into the back of the galley there. Otherwise, no problem. Interesting note, this is not the original transmission. Apparently that was blown up. This is a 1967 Hemi transmission, which is also cool, but not quite right. It's a while later, and the GT motor is up on a stand and ready to go. If you've ever put an engine on a stand before, you know the hardest and most time-consuming part is finding suitable fasteners, but I did that. I did intend to remove the flex plate first, but I forgot. There are a lot of original details that we should find and catalog before we tear it down. Here's one shared with other big block C bodies. This is a spark plug wire holder for the number 7 wire. On B bodies and other cars, the number 8 wire wraps around like this, but on C bodies, the number 7 does too, and they use this bracket to keep it in place and away from the steering or whatever else is in the way over here. We were somewhat surprised to learn that the light style oil pressure switches were painted on the engines. The big giant gauge style cans were not on the engines at the time of painting, but these seem to have been. We actually have another 6-barrel engine in the house to confirm this. This is Trev's engine, and this oil switch is also painted orange, and it's taped off in the same exact way. I think these are factory spark plug wires. They're black with the orange boots. They still have the little nylon clip thingies. The shields are still in place. Those are mounted on head bolts. It does seem the exhaust manifolds have been off, judging by the gaskets in here. From the factory, there shouldn't have been a gasket. This would have been a straight metal-to-metal connection. These do appear to be the original exhaust manifolds. If you know Mopar, then you know these heat riser flapper valves are frequently seized. This one, remarkably, is not. Original engine mounts, complete with original part numbers. This appears to be original hardware on the mount bracket. The passenger side valve cover has nuts and studs on these lower corners. Interestingly, the driver's side does not. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to. This is the original cast iron dual point distributor with the right part number and a matching date code. Note, the 6-barrel and 6-pack distributors have a special points wire that comes all the way back to the coil mounted over here, and this plastic crimp connection is 100% correct and original. Extra special 6-barrel throttle hold down and kick down lever thingy. It's held in place with these 2 bolts, and this opening is oval to make room for the brake vacuum hose and the PCV hose to go through. Look at the crazy amount of corrosion in these carburetors. Those green spots are brass air bleeds. There's supposed to be holes through those. That list number on the middle carb, 4376, appears to be correct for the 1976 barrel 440. The outers are 4382 and 4383. These appear to be correct bolts over here, but these studs and nuts are wrong. On the 1969 6-barrel cars, the A12 liftoff hood, Roadrunners, and Super Bs, they used an aluminum 6-barrel manifold. These production manifolds for 1970 are cast iron, although there may have been some stragglers in aluminum. I'm not totally sure on that. The aluminum ones were made by Edelbrock. Notice there's an idle solenoid down here. That is shared by many high-performance engines. For example, the 340 had one in 1971. This is the all-important VIN stamping down on the right lower side of the block, and it does match our 1970 Sport Fury GT, which is great news. The engine ID pad is up here on the top in front of the valley pan on a raised deck engine like the 440. I don't know if you'll be able to read it, but it says F440, and then down at the bottom it says 10/8, which is the assembly date. Makes sense for this November built car. And over here it says HP2. Yeah, you definitely can't see that. Just take my word for it. Apparently the GTs did not have the fancy fuel vapor separator that would mount here and have an extra return line going back to the tank. Either way, this is not an original filter. This is the factory harmonic balancer with an external weight on it. That is to account for the gigantic heavy-duty rods used in these engines. Those were not specific to the 6-barrel, as I discussed in my video on these. They were also shared by 440 HPs from 70 onward. You know, it might be due for a water pump. You're gonna wanna hold your breath. That's a big improvement. Certainly not 100%, but I got most of the big chunks. Now with your standard cruising model small block teardown, I don't usually worry about this too much, but if ever there was a time we didn't want to break hardware, it's this. We're trying to keep everything together, correct and original, and preserve as much originality and factory stuff as we can. So I'm going to go around and spray every single bit of exposed thread I can see. I'm probably going to be heating bolts and just going as far as I can toward not breaking stuff, tearing this one down. With all the hardware sprayed, I'm going to get the plugs and wires out of the way. You can usually get these to come off in one piece if you just give them a twist before you pull. All right, that's like a 0-mile distributor cap with nice brass contacts. It's run, but almost brand new. Okay, this does appear to be a replacement set. They look right, but they aren't original. The distributor is loose, but you can't actually get it out because 6-barrel. I'm getting the original engine wiring harness loose. I want to show you a couple things. First, this temperature sender end is like kind of melty and burned, and it barely came off. And then there's some more special 6-barrel stuff. This is an ignition wire that comes over to this idle solenoid from the main harness. It jumps across the front. I've never seen this before. It's a special hold-down bracket, and there's a matching clip. It holds it right there. And then this spade, which has no protection on it for some reason, pops onto the solenoid like that. Got the spark plugs out. Think we're doing the right thing here. There's evidence of moisture and rust on all of them. Tell you what, I can see into all of these chambers. There's very minor rust, actually. Nothing looks super horrible, scaly, flaky, or pitted. This might be a relatively easy one to unseize. We're gonna find out. The story is exactly the same here on the driver's side bank. Number 3 is the worst looking one. You can see the patchy stuff on there. They're all a little bit orange though. Even number 3 doesn't look that bad inside. So that's good news. Fire. This thing looks crusty, but every single exhaust manifold nut on this side came off, or the stud came out. This car had no exhaust on it for many, many years. I don't know why, it just had open manifolds. So this is definitely a place where moisture could have entered the engine, and as you can see, some certainly did. It's not too horrible. There are no pools of water or anything like that. And again, no flaky rust, just what I'd call heavy surface rust. Found the block casting date, July 25th, 1969. That's just under 3 months of lead time between the casting date on the block and the assembly date, which makes sense. There's always going to be a gap like that, but it can vary. More interesting 6-barrel stuff. This is the same cap that was used on other 440s, but for some reason, it's not painted. Generally, they were. Apparently, the promo car, which you can see in Period magazine photos, also does not have a painted oil cap. This does seem to be the right 70 breather, the right hose, the right clamps, and all that. Interestingly, in some applications, these clamps are red. These ones were pretty obviously never red. I don't know if that's right or not, but they're there. The rubber breather grommet has paint on it, which is right, and it's actually still kind of squishy. I got the original 3-rib PCV valve out of its grommet as well. Again, still squishy. Seriously. Every one of these has just come right off. Okay, stuff's a little different on this side. Apparently critters have been in this one and they left us presents. I know I pointed this fuel line out. We got that loose with the appropriate flare wrench. That, like everything else so far, just popped right off with no problem. Anyway, this line would not be seen on any other 6-barrel car, but apparently on the GT, it's correct. Now the distributor can come out if it wants to. I guess I could have sprayed that. There you go. Do I dare test this vacuum can with my mouth? Yes, I do. It works. The critters were in the right side manifold as well. Their debris just didn't make it into the ports. There is some more extensive flaky rust in the exhaust ports on this driver's side head. That's the worst I'm seeing so far. I mentioned the number 3 plug was the ugliest one. That is because the number 3 exhaust valve was open. This is interesting though. I can shine my light in here and I'm not sure you'll be able to see it. It looks really good. This is supposed to be about a 36,000 mile engine. And from what I've seen so far, that's accurate. We're gonna see more in a minute, obviously, but look at how clean it is under there. And it's not rusty and horrible, just slightly greasy. Here's a look through the distributor hole. There is some surface rust in there, but it's not bad at all. You know what I don't see? Horrible gunk buildup. Look at that lifter. Very nice. I've got the intake manifold bolts out. Note, these do not have washers. They're not supposed to. On big blocks that have the ground cable going to an intake bolt, there will be one washer for that bolt, but that's it. We also have that special bracket for the clip that goes to the idle solenoid wire in this bag. And here's that special coil bracket. Note, it is also painted orange. Very cool. The strap that holds the coil itself is not, but this bracket was on there when the engines were painted. And this thing still has its original radio noise isolator mounted on there. And now for a gentle prying. Just quiet on set. Delicate operation. Okay, we're gonna smack that with a hammer. Looks heavy. Okay, we've confirmed the manifold's been off before. This is a Felpro 9546 Valley tray. It's also got no orange engine paint on it, which it should, at least on the ends here around the manifold, and it should never have nasty orange silicone either. All right, this isn't very uncommon. Apparently there was water sitting under the manifold, and it did actually rust a small hole there. So at some point there was water in this thing. Moment of truth.
Oh, dang.
Yep, it's an engine, and it's very clean. All right, a few things I've noticed. First, there is some nasty, scaly stuff in some of these intake ports. Nice shiny valves, though. Not too horrible. Definitely in need of a cleaning. More chunks in the number 5 intake runner. And obviously in the surrounds around the exhaust crossovers. That's not at all surprising. Not much carbon in there. Look at the cam. It's beautiful. That's just in really, really nice shape. Interesting. It does have that same pattern you see on the newer cams. That kind of speckly black stuff. Tom's doing the honors of making a horrible mess under the engine. I'm predicting clean water at the bottom. Let's see.
Original drain plug with the washer. Oil.
Nope, just oil.
It is a little
Milky, but not much. I got scared after finding that hole rusted through the valley pan, but we're good. Valve cover bolts. That one is definitely aftermarket, and I think a couple of these may actually be valley pan bolts. Getting a hammer. Might be a bit. Valve covers are off. Goofy rubber gaskets, not factory cork. Basically everything in here is clean enough to eat off of. It's looking really good. There's a look at the HP springs. Note this is a wire spring with a flat damper inside. Also note there's a slight mismatch with the retainer. That is factory. I've had people yell at me in the past for having a mismatch there. That's how they came. Nice. The streak continues. Oh, factory water pump bolt. Note, this actually has a built-in nylock. It's different than the nut style nylocks. It's a little pin of the stuff in a hole in the bolt. Finally found one bolt that does not just want to come out. I'm heating over here, and it's obviously being effective because it's smoking out of various bits of the cooling system over here. This one goes through the water pump housing into the block. Most likely, there's gunk built up around the shoulder of the bolt, and that's what's holding it in place. I haven't grabbed a breaker bar or anything like that. I'm just using my small Milwaukee Impact. That has the nice effect of shocking the bolt as I try to back it out, and it doesn't really have enough torque to break things. Also, I'm using a chrome deep socket, which is great because it deflects and doesn't transfer energy so well. Evan held a hammer up to the bolt, and then it came loose. See if there's coolant in that hole. I don't remember. There's dust. Yeah. No water, just rusty nightmares. Yeah, there you go. These thermostat bolts are the next thing I'm really worried about. So again, we're going to try our best not to ruin anything and heat this up really well. The idea here is to expand the material around the bolt, not the bolt itself. Telling you, heat and the tiny impact are the secret sauce. Don't know if we're going to be able to reuse this housing. There's going to be some yucky corrosion stuff. But it came off in one piece. Gross! Evan has this nifty tool that will hopefully help us remove the heater nipple. It wraps around the outside of it and like locks onto it and spins it. He puts a bolt down the middle of the thing so it won't collapse. Or when it collapses, it'll collapse less. This nipple has to come out because it blocks one of the housing bolts. Although you can remove it with a wrench. It's really annoying. Here, I'll just hold this. Yeah, buddy. Nice. We didn't even heat that. This disgusting thermostat says 180 on it. Pump came right off. Housing gets a hammer. Nice. More gross stuff. And nice clean coolant. I don't believe this is an original pump. I'm pretty sure it's been replaced. It should have some overspray on it, and it doesn't. Those do appear to be original fuel pump bolts. Note, they've got the built-in washers and the short hex heads. So now we're here, and we are going to be pulling the valve gear and the heads in just a second. But I soaked all these cylinders a while ago, and periodically, as we've been going through this teardown, I have come here with a socket and a breaker bar and just wiggled the crank back and forth. If it magically breaks loose, that would be great. Doesn't really change things. Either way, we're going to take this thing apart. It needs a serious cleaning if nothing else. However, it's not much. But that crank is definitely wiggling. And every time I move it, there's a noise. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but I can. It's like a squishing. And it's getting louder. Anyway, we're getting places. Oil pump drive's coming out. Of course, you do this with a screwdriver. I did have to work this one a little bit. I don't think it's all cruddy. As you can see, this engine doesn't have much buildup or anything, but there could be a bit of rust down there. It's coming out now. Looks really nice, actually. Factory pump drive, no roll pin. All right, we found a couple more interesting things. First, notice the black drips there. That is shellac, or that Indian head sealant, the barbecue sauce smelling stuff. Turns out the factory used that on factory steel shim gaskets. We have a second non-rebuilt 446 barrel engine over here, which has the same drips. Not the same, they're pretty random, but similar pattern. And you can see here how it sat in all of the grooves on the steel shim head gasket. It's in the top of all the bores too. I knew old timers did this on steel shims. I did not know the factory did. Another interesting thing, the distributor drive bushing in this engine is aluminum, not bronze. We kind of thought that was wrong, but our other 6-barrel engine has the exact same thing. Valve gear is off. I've demonstrated that many times, so I spared you on this one. Also, I'm running short on minutes. Again, these look very nice. Seriously, dude, just a little bit of heat and this popped right loose. This is going way too easily.
Jinxed yourself.
You're probably not wrong. Whee! Ha! Got it in the bucket. And now for the moment we've probably all been waiting for. We're gonna remove this head. Let's see what we've got. Of course, I did break these free with a breaker bar first. You'll notice I'm not knocking them loose with an impact gun, just backing the bolts out. Left side head is off. We did have to beat on it quite a bit. The bottom of the Felpro gasket stuck very effectively, so that did bend. Notice we do have some horrible rusty scaly stuff in here. Honestly though, still not that bad. Look, that's coming right off. The scaly stuff came down from the valve and the head, I think. How about this guy? That's a really yucky one. Yeah, there's no actual rust in that cylinder. Just a little bit here. That would clean right up. Yeah, very nice. Here's the cylinder head. Yeah, we've got little bits of scalies here, but that would definitely clean up too. Gotta be honest with you, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop because this teardown stuff is not supposed to go this well. Especially when an engine's been sitting not running since the early 1980s. But seriously, like, look, that landed in the bucket. This came out. Things are going too well. The last couple hours have kind of been a blur, just trying to get through this and learning stuff. I think I explicitly said, hey, these heads definitely have been off as I suspected. And that's obvious because of the Felpro head gaskets. These should have been those steel shims covered in shellac, we now know. As you can see, I'm shocking the head with a hammer here just to get it wiggling. As soon as you do that, you can lift it off. And that gasket also held very well down at the bottom. Okay, we got more chunks on this side. I think it's gonna be okay. I hope it's okay. Remember how I said the critter stuff wasn't in the ports on this side? The evidence determined that was a lie. Still though, not bad on rust. There is a little bit down here. Yeah, we've got a patch in the bottom of that cylinder. Obviously this exhaust valve is open as well. That one's perfect. This, we've got more of that crispy rust stuff, but nothing in the cylinder because the piston's in the way. Maybe just a little down at the bottom. This one, number 4. That is the only one that seems to have any scaly stuff at all. And it really isn't. It's just like a little patch It's not a pit. That's our guy, though. I'll bet you good money that piston is why it's not turning right now. Everything else looks beautiful. With number 4 cleaned out, you can see what we've got. Again, those are little patches, not horrible pits, but there is likely to be some scarring there when we get this off. Also, number 2 has some. It didn't feel quite as bad. It's pretty smooth, but there's just that little patch there. I've refilled all of these chambers with magic penetrating spray. I sprayed all the way up around the pistons to try and get to the rings, and I'm watching gunk come down from around them, which is good. That's exactly what we want. We want to knock any of that stuff loose, make sure these rings aren't seized solid, and get this thing moving. I'm now going to set it on fire. A little bit of heat can help a lot in this endeavor. A bit over a month back now, we managed to get all of the horribly seized pistons in an aluminum Slane 6 moving using this same spray and this same heating technique. As mentioned, I'm kind of running out of time here, and we may have to end up leaving this thing soaking for like some days or weeks, actually. But I'm hoping this will work. If nothing else, it'll be on fire. After heating all the bores, the next thing we need to do is shock these pistons. Last time, I used a wood block, which worked quite well, but it also left horrible wood chips everywhere. This time, Evan gave me this giant chunk of lead that fits conveniently in the bores, right on top of the pistons, and also a lead hammer. That should shock things quite effectively. Lead is a relatively soft metal, and it shouldn't hurt our pistons at all. That one sounds very different, but I think it's because it's at bottom dead center. 7 sounds pretty stuck too. I'm sure this is obvious. I'm not trying to break anything. I just want to shock these pistons. See if anything's changed. Not yet. Usually what you'll have to do after heating and beating and spraying and repeating that several times is try and rock the crank back and forth. You want to find just that little bit of movement, and as you go back and forth, it should turn into a free moving piston. This was actually easier when I had cylinder heads on it. Now it wants to rotate on me. I've actually almost caught a 440 in the nuts once before. That wasn't fun, and I don't want to do it again. I'm going to break an elbow and my face. It's going to happen. Now, someone in a comment on a recent video said they cannot believe that people try to turn seized engines with the bolt here. That's a big bolt. It can take a lot of force. But notice, I'm not standing on an 8-foot long breaker bar pipe trying to do this. I've got a 3-foot handle here, and I'm just shocking it back and forth. I'll put a little tension on it in either direction, but that movement in the middle is really what I'm looking for. I am not standing on this, over-torquing the bolt, and trying to break it off in the crank. Unfortunately, all my helpers went home, so I don't have anyone to sit here and feel pistons and tap on things while I'm working it this way. Let's heat it and beat it again. See where that gets us. And we're gonna try not to roll it into the grill. All right, it's one forever later. More heating, more spraying, more beating, and more wiggling with the breaker bar, and I can definitely now hear it shifting, and I can feel it when I put my finger right here. Yep, that is a little bit of movement. So there's no doubt in my mind this thing is about to let go. Still not moving far, but I can see it and I can hear it. Oh yeah, dude. I bet you can hear that over there. This thing is moving. Still just a little bit. God, I hate to admit defeat because we have made so much progress and I know this engine is going to let go, but I am just out of time for this. And I won't be able to get back here to rock it for like 2 weeks. So what I'm going to do is let these sit here and soak. And I guarantee you while it's sitting here, that penetrant is going to work down into the rings. This thing's going to be freed up and spinning with no problem. Okay, maybe I shouldn't guarantee that, but I'm pretty sure. Now here's the deal. This engine is slated for a full rebuild. It deserves the best and it'll get it. However, we kind of have to balance that idea with the idea of preservation. This is an original 36,000 mile 6-barrel GT engine, and it has original pistons and original just about everything else. And if we could save that stuff, I think we should save that stuff. There is minor rust in here, but I'm pretty sure we could clean that up with a hone and this thing would live just fine. The 440 installed in the bed of my A100 truck has worse rust than this, and that thing runs amazing and doesn't smoke. Everything I know about the 6-barrel GT, I learned from Tom or Trev here at Rocket. Trev is like the Sport Fury GT guy. He tells me that of the V-Code cars that have their original engines, only 2 were complete, fully dressed engines. And this is now the only one that is known to have been torn down and is slated for rebuilding and reinstallation in a car. I feel pretty honored. I hate to leave you with this slightly disappointing cliffhanger, but I am fully confident we're going to be seeing this engine again. We're going to see this engine brought back to life, and that is going to be great. Until then, as ever, I do thank you very much for watching. And remember, don't call it a sports fury.